The autumn sun cast long shadows across Maple Avenue as Andre walked from house to house. The 16-year-old adjusted his blue school vest and checked his clipboard one more time. His high school's annual charity drive was in full swing, and he had volunteered to cover this upscale neighborhood. The colorful leaves crunched beneath his feet as he approached the next house, a large two-story with perfectly trimmed hedges. Andre took a deep breath before pressing the doorbell. He had been at this for 2 hours already, and the responses had been mixed. Some residents were friendly, some politely declined, and others simply didn't answer. This was his first time canvassing in this particular neighborhood, and he couldn't help but notice he was the only black person on these streets. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, rehearsing his pitch one more time. The charity drive was raising money for the local veterans shelter, a cause close to his heart since his grandfather had served in the military. The doorbell chimed inside, and Andre straightened his posture, putting on his most professional smile. He heard movement inside, and through the decorative glass panels he could see someone approaching. The door opened slightly, revealing a middle-aged white woman with blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She peered through the crack, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Andre. "Hello, ma'am," Andre began, his voice clear and respectful. "My name is Andre, and I'm a junior at Westlake High School. We're collecting donations for our annual charity drive to support the veterans shelter downtown. Would you be interested?" And before he could finish, the woman cut him off. "I'm not interested," she said sharply, beginning to close the door. "Of course, no problem," Andre replied, maintaining his smile. "I can leave some information if you'd like to donate later. All proceeds go directly to—" "I said I'm not interested," the woman repeated, her voice louder this time. "Please leave my property immediately." Andre nodded, taking a step back. "Thank you for your time, ma'am. Have a nice day." He turned to leave, making a note on his clipboard. This wasn't the first rejection of the day, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. Part of the volunteer training had prepared them for this. Not everyone would want to donate, and that was okay. As he walked down the driveway toward the next house, Andre didn't notice the woman watching him through her window, phone pressed to her ear. Inside her house, Patricia Wilson paced back and forth in her living room. "Yes, there's a suspicious young man going door to door," she said into her phone. "He claims he's collecting for charity, but I've never seen him in this neighborhood before. He looks out of place." The 911 operator on the other end asked for a description. "He's a black teenager, maybe 16 or 17, wearing a blue vest. He's carrying a clipboard and going to all the houses on the street. I don't think he belongs here. This is a safe neighborhood, and we don't usually have people like him around." The operator assured Patricia that officers would be dispatched to check on the situation. Patricia hung up, feeling a sense of satisfaction. She had lived in this neighborhood for 15 years and prided herself on keeping watch. In her mind, she was performing a civic duty, protecting her community from potential threats. Outside, unaware of what was happening, Andre continued his rounds. The next house belonged to an elderly couple who not only donated, but offered him a bottle of water and words of encouragement. Their kindness lifted his spirits, and he proceeded with renewed enthusiasm. 3 houses later, Andre was recording another donation when he noticed a police cruiser slowly turning onto the street. He didn't think much of it at first. Police regularly patrolled this area. But when a second cruiser appeared and both vehicles stopped near where he was standing, Andre felt a knot form in his stomach. 2 officers exited the first car, while a third remained in the second vehicle. They approached Andre with measured steps, hands resting casually near their belts. "Afternoon, sir," one officer said, a tall man with a crew cut. His nameplate read Officer Reynolds. "Mind if we have a word with you?" Andre's heart raced, but he kept his expression neutral. His parents had had the talk with him years ago, how to behave around police, especially as a young black man. "Keep your hands visible, speak clearly. Make no sudden movements, be respectful." "Of course, officer," Andre replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Is everything okay? We received a call about someone suspicious going door to door in this neighborhood," the second officer explained. She was shorter, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her nameplate read, Officer Chen. Can you tell us what you're doing? Here? Andre nodded, slowly raising his clipboard to show them. I'm collecting donations for my high school's charity drive. It's for the Veterans Shelter downtown. I have my student ID and the official letter from the school explaining the fundraiser. He carefully reached into his vest pocket and produced the items. Officer Reynolds examined the ID and letter while Officer Chen maintained her position a few feet away, watching Andre closely. Westlake High, huh? Officer Reynolds said, looking at the ID. That's a good school. My nephew goes there. Andre felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this would be resolved quickly. Yes, sir. I'm in the honors program there. As Officer Reynolds continued to check his documentation, Andre noticed movement from one of the houses behind him. Patricia Wilson had emerged from her home and was now walking toward them, arms crossed over her chest. That's him, officers, she called out, pointing at Andre. That's the person I called about. Andre turned, recognizing her as the woman who had shut the door in his face earlier. His stomach dropped as he realized what was happening. Officer Chen stepped forward. Ma'am, is this the individual you reported? Patricia nodded vigorously. Yes. He came to my door claiming to be collecting for charity. But I've never seen him in this neighborhood before. He doesn't belong here. Andre felt his face grow hot with embarrassment and frustration. He wanted to speak up to defend himself, but he remembered his father's words. Sometimes staying quiet is the safest option. Officer Reynolds handed the ID and letter back to Andre. These seem to be in order, he said, his tone professional. He has proper identification and documentation for a school fundraiser. Patricia wasn't satisfied. Well, he should have some kind of permit to solicit in this neighborhood. Did you check for that? This is private property. Officer Chen turned to Andre. Do you have a permit for door-to-door solicitation? Before Andre could answer, a car door slammed in the distance, drawing everyone's attention to the end of the street. A black SUV with government plates had pulled up, and someone was getting out. The situation was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would leave Patricia Wilson completely speechless. Officer Reynolds shifted his weight from one foot to the other as he considered the question about permits. The autumn breeze picked up, rustling the leaves around them as the tension in the air thickened. Well, technically, Officer Reynolds began, most residential solicitation for nonprofit or educational purposes doesn't require a special permit. In this district, the school letter states this is an approved educational fundraiser. Patricia's face flushed with frustration. That can't be right. We can't just have anyone walking around our neighborhood knocking on doors. Andre stood still, keeping his hands visible just as his parents had taught him. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. He'd been raised to believe that hard work and good manners would open doors for him. But right now, all he felt was humiliation. Officer Chen stepped slightly between Andre and Patricia, her voice calm but firm. Ma'am, based on what we're seeing, this young man is conducting legitimate fundraising for his school. His documentation checks out. Patricia's voice rose an octave. Well, I don't care what he says he's doing. He doesn't look like he belongs. Here. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years and I know who comes and goes. Andre flinched at her words. Didn't look like he belonged? The implication was clear, and it stung worse than if she'd slapped him. He'd faced subtle racism before, but rarely had it been so blatant, so unapologetic. Several neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, curious about the commotion. An elderly man with a walking stick made his way slowly down his driveway. A young couple with a baby stood on their porch watching. A middle-aged man walked his golden retriever closer to the scene, pretending to be out for a casual stroll. Officer Reynolds seemed to notice the growing audience and shifted uncomfortably. Let's all take a breath here, he suggested. There's no need to escalate this situation. Patricia wasn't having it. I'm not escalating anything. I'm protecting my neighborhood. Who's going to be responsible if something goes missing from one of these houses? You? She pointed accusingly at the officers. I was taught to be vigilant and report suspicious activity, and that's exactly what I did. Andre wanted to disappear. Each word from Patricia's mouth made him feel smaller, less human. He'd been taught to stand tall, to be proud of who he was, but in moments like these it was hard to remember those lessons. A third police car turned onto the street, rolling slowly toward the gathering. Officer Chen noticed it and raised an eyebrow at her partner. "We didn't call for backup," she said quietly. Officer Reynolds shrugged. "Maybe dispatch sent them when they heard the address. This is Councilman Peterson's neighborhood, after all." The new police car parked behind the others, and a tall officer with gray at his temples stepped out. His uniform had additional insignia. This was someone with rank. He approached the group with measured steps, his expression unreadable. "Afternoon, officers," he said, nodding to Reynolds and Chen. "I'm Captain Thomas. What's the situation here?" "Officer," Chen straightened her posture. "We're responding to a call about suspicious activity, sir. This young man is conducting fundraising for Westlake High School. We've verified his ID and documentation." Captain Thomas looked at Andre, then at Patricia, then back at his officers. "And the issue is?" Patricia stepped forward. "The issue, Captain, is that this person doesn't belong in our neighborhood. He claims to be collecting for charity, but how do we know that's true? How do we know he's not casing our houses for a break-in later?" Andre couldn't hold his tongue any longer. "Sir," he addressed the captain, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I'm just trying to do my volunteer work for school. I have all the proper documentation. I've been respectful to everyone I've spoken with today." Captain Thomas studied Andre for a moment, then looked at the clipboard in his hands. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. Andre nodded and handed over his clipboard. Captain Thomas flipped through the pages, noting the names, addresses, and donation amounts that Andre had carefully recorded. Each entry was neat, organized, and included the time of donation. "This looks very professional," Captain Thomas commented. "You've collected quite a few donations today." "Yes, sir," Andre replied. "Most people have been very generous." Patricia made a dismissive noise. "That doesn't prove anything. He could have written all that himself." The elderly man who had been watching from his driveway finally reached the group. "Actually," he said, his voice cracking with age but firm with conviction, "he couldn't have, because my wife and I are on that list. We donated $20 about half an hour ago." He turned to Andre. "You're doing good work, son. Don't let anyone tell you different." Andre felt a rush of gratitude toward the old man. "Thank you, sir." "Captain." Thomas handed the clipboard back to Andre. "Well, that seems to settle it. This young man is conducting legitimate business." Patricia wasn't ready to concede. "So you're just going to let him continue? What about the safety of our neighborhood?" "Ma'am," Captain Thomas said, his patience visibly wearing thin, "there is no evidence that this young man poses any threat to public safety. In fact, the only disruption I'm seeing right now is this unnecessary confrontation." The young couple that had been watching from their porch approached now, the woman bouncing a fussy baby on her hip. "We donated too," the man said. "He was very polite, showed us all his credentials, even played peekaboo with our daughter." He smiled at Andre. "She doesn't warm up to just anyone." Andre returned the smile, remembering the chubby-cheeked baby who had giggled when he made funny faces. These small connections, these moments of human kindness, were why he had volunteered for this fundraiser in the first place. More neighbors were gathering now, most of them seeming supportive of Andre. Patricia looked around, perhaps realizing she was losing ground. "Well," she huffed, "I still don't think it's appropriate. There should be better oversight of who's allowed to go door to door in residential areas." Officer Chen stepped closer to Patricia. "Ma'am, calling the police should be reserved for actual emergencies or genuine concerns about illegal activity. Using emergency services to report someone simply because you don't think they look like they belong isn't an appropriate use of police resources." Patricia's face reddened. "Are you saying I did something wrong by being cautious? By looking out for my community?" "I'm saying," Officer Chen continued carefully, "that we need to consider whether our concerns are based on actual suspicious behavior or other factors." The implication hung in the air. Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Andre looked down at his shoes, not wanting to see the expressions on anyone's face. Captain Thomas cleared his throat. I think we've spent enough time on this matter. Officers Reynolds and Chen, you can clear this call. No further action is necessary. He turned to Andre. Young man, you're free to continue your fundraising. If you encounter any further issues, don't hesitate to flag down an officer. Patricia threw up her hands. This is unbelievable. So now we're just supposed to open our doors to anyone who comes knocking? What happened to protect and serve? That's exactly what we're doing, ma'am, Captain Thomas replied. We're protecting this young man's right to conduct lawful activities without harassment, and we're serving our community by ensuring that all citizens are treated with respect and dignity. As the officers began to return to their vehicles, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows and government plates turned onto the street. It moved with purpose, pulling up behind the police cars. The engine cut off, and the driver's door opened. The crowd, which had been starting to disperse, paused. Even the officers turned to look at the new arrival. Andre, who had been gathering his things to continue his rounds, froze in place. A woman stepped out of the SUV. She was dressed in a tailored navy suit, her natural hair styled in a professional updo. She carried herself with undeniable authority, and as she approached, several people straightened their posture instinctively. Andre's face broke into a wide, relieved smile. "Mom," he called out. The woman looked over, her expression shifting from professional concern to maternal worry in an instant. "Andre, what's going on here?" She quickened her pace, moving toward the group with purpose. Captain Thomas stepped forward, recognition dawning on his face. "Mayor Johnson, this is unexpected. We were just resolving a minor situation here." Patricia Wilson's mouth fell open, her face draining of color as the realization hit her. The black teenager she had called the police on was the son of the mayor, the first black female mayor in the city's history. Mayor Diana Johnson moved with purpose toward her son, her eyes quickly assessing the situation. 3 police cars, a gathering crowd, and Andre standing with his clipboard, looking both relieved and embarrassed to see her. Her maternal instincts warred with her professional training as she approached the group. "Andre, are you all right?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder while maintaining her composure. "I'm fine, Mom," Andre replied quietly. "Just a misunderstanding." Diana turned to Captain Thomas, her expression demanding answers without her having to voice the question. "Mayor Johnson," Captain Thomas began, straightening his uniform unconsciously. "We responded to a call about suspicious activity in the neighborhood. When we arrived, we found your son conducting fundraising for his school's charity drive. His documentation is in order, and we were just wrapping things up." Diana nodded slowly, her gaze moving from the captain to officers Reynolds and Chen, and finally landing on Patricia Wilson, who was now staring at the ground, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. "I see," Diana said, her voice measured and calm. "And who made the call?" There was an uncomfortable silence. Patricia seemed to shrink under the mayor's gaze, but to her credit, she finally stepped forward. "I did," Patricia admitted, her voice much quieter than before. I didn't know he was your son." The implication of those words hung in the air, like a thundercloud. Would it have mattered if he wasn't the mayor's son? Would any black teenager deserve this treatment, regardless of who their parents were? Diana took a deep breath. Years of political training helping her maintain her professional demeanor, despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't just about Andre anymore. This was about every black child who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. "Ms. Diana let the question hang. "Wilson." "Patricia Wilson," the woman replied, finally looking up. "Ms. Wilson, I'd like to understand exactly what prompted your call to the police today." Patricia glanced around, perhaps hoping for support from her neighbors, but found none. The crowd watched in silence, waiting for her response. I saw someone I didn't recognize going door to door," Patricia began, her words careful. "In this neighborhood, we look out for each other. I was concerned about potential scams or break-ins." Diana nodded, her expression neutral. "I appreciate community vigilance, Ms. Wilson. It's important that neighbors watch out for each other. But I'm curious. Did my son do anything specific that raised your suspicions? Did he behave in a threatening manner? Did he refuse to show identification when asked? Patricia's face flushed. No, but did he enter anyone's property without permission? Did he become aggressive or argumentative when you declined to donate? No, he didn't, but then what exactly, Ms. Wilson, made him suspicious to you? Diana's voice remained calm, but there was no mistaking the steel behind her words. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone present knew the answer, but no one wanted to be the one to say it out loud. Finally, the elderly man who had defended Andre earlier spoke up. We all know what this is about, and it's time we stop dancing around it. This young man was suspicious because he's black, and this is a predominantly white neighborhood. Let's at least be honest about that. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeing, others uncomfortable with the bluntness of the statement. Diana gave the elderly man a grateful nod before turning back to Patricia. Ms. Wilson, I'm not here to shame you or to make this an even bigger incident than it already is, but I do want you to understand something. That young man you called the police on? He's the vice president of his class. He maintains a 4.0 GPA. He volunteers at the Veterans Hospital every other weekend because his grandfather served in Vietnam. He spent the last 3 weekends going door to door in different neighborhoods, raising money for homeless veterans instead of hanging out with his friends or playing video games. Andre shifted uncomfortably, embarrassed by his mother's praise, but standing a little straighter as she spoke. But none of that should matter, Diana continued. Even if he wasn't any of those things, even if he was just an average kid trying to do something good for his community, he deserves the basic dignity of not having the police called on him for simply existing in a space where someone like you thinks he doesn't belong. Patricia's eyes welled with tears, whether from shame or from feeling attacked, it wasn't clear. I wasn't trying to. I know, Diana said, her tone softening slightly. Most people don't wake up in the morning intending to cause harm, but intentions and impact are two different things. The impact of actions like yours today goes far beyond this one incident. Captain Thomas, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. Mayor Johnson, if I may, I believe we've addressed the immediate situation. Your son is free to continue his fundraising activities. Unless you wish to file a formal complaint, we can consider this matter resolved from a law enforcement perspective. Diana considered this for a moment, then looked at Andre. What do you think? It's your call. Andre looked at Patricia, then at the gathered neighbors, and finally at the police officers. He thought about all the other kids who might find themselves in similar situations, kids who didn't have a mayor for a mother to come to their rescue. No formal complaint, he said finally, but I do have something to say. Diana nodded encouragingly, stepping back to give her son the floor. Andre took a deep breath and faced Patricia directly. Ms. Wilson, I don't know you, and you don't know me. But today you made assumptions about me based on how I look. You saw my skin color and decided I didn't belong here. You called the police, which could have put me in real danger. His voice was steady, his words carefully chosen. This wasn't the angry outburst of a teenager, but the measured response of a young man who had, unfortunately, been preparing for moments like this his entire life. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, Andre continued. I'm saying it because I want you to think about what would have happened if I wasn't the mayor's son. What if I was just a regular black kid trying to raise money for charity? The police might not have been so quick to check my documentation. They might have handled me more roughly. In some places, incidents like this have ended tragically. Patricia wiped a tear from her cheek, unable to meet Andre's gaze. I forgive you, Andre said finally. But I hope you'll think twice before making assumptions about people in the future. And maybe, if you see a kid like me in your neighborhood, again, you could offer them a glass of water instead of calling the police. The young couple with the baby stepped forward, the woman bouncing their child on her hip. We'd like to make a donation, the man said, pulling out his wallet. And we'd like to apologize on behalf of our neighborhood. This isn't who we want to be. One by one, other neighbors came forward, some to donate, others simply to shake Andre's hand and apologize for what had happened. Even Officer Chen approached, quietly slipping some cash into the donation envelope and giving Andre a respectful nod. Throughout it all, Patricia remained where she stood, watching as her neighbors rallied around the very person she had tried to cast as an outsider. The realization seemed to be dawning on her face. She was the one who now stood alone. Diana watched her son handle the situation with a grace and maturity that filled her with pride, even as her heart ached that he had to face such challenges at all. As a mother, she wanted to protect him from every hurt, every injustice. As the mayor, she knew that moments like these, painful as they were, could become catalysts for change. Finally, as the crowd began to disperse and the officers prepared to leave, Diana approached Patricia, who looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "Ms. Wilson," Diana said, extending her hand. "I have a proposition for you." Patricia looked up, surprised. "A proposition?" "Yes. The city is hosting a community dialogue series on racial bias and community policing next week at the Civic Center. I'd like you to attend, not as a form of punishment, but as an opportunity for growth and understanding." Patricia hesitated, then slowly took the mayor's outstretched hand. I'll be there." Diana nodded, then turned to her son. "Ready to go, Andre? Or do you want to finish your rounds?" Andre looked at his clipboard, then at the street ahead. "I think I'll finish. I've only got a few more houses to go." Diana smiled, pride evident in her eyes. "That's my boy. I'll see you at home for dinner." She turned to the remaining officers. "Thank you for your professionalism today, officers. Captain Thomas, I'd appreciate a follow-up report on this incident by tomorrow." As Diana walked back to her SUV, she heard Patricia call out behind her, "Mayor Johnson?" Diana turned, one eyebrow raised questioningly. Patricia fumbled in her purse, finally extracting her checkbook. With trembling hands, she wrote out a check and approached Andre. "For the veterans," she said simply, handing it over before quickly retreating to her house. Andre looked down at the check and his eyes widened. The amount was considerably larger than any other donation he'd received that day. "Mom," he called, out showing her the check. Diana looked at it and gave a small, sad smile. "Sometimes, son, people have to pay a high price to learn an important lesson. The question is whether they truly learn from it." She nodded toward the remaining houses on the street. "Go on now. I'll see you at home." As Andre continued his fundraising, and Diana drove away, neither of them noticed Patricia watching from her window, phone in hand, tears streaming down her face as she dialed a number. "Hello, Community Relations. I'd like to register for next week's dialogue series on racial bias." 1 week later, the community center buzzed with nervous energy as people filed in for the first session of the dialogue series on racial bias and community policing. The large meeting room had been arranged with chairs in a circle rather than the usual rows, creating an atmosphere of equality and open communication. Mayor Diana Johnson stood near the entrance, greeting attendees with handshakes and warm smiles. She wore a simple blazer over jeans today, less formal than her usual mayoral attire, a deliberate choice to set a more relaxed tone for the evening. "Thank you for coming," she said to each person who entered, regardless of whether they were a city official, a police officer, or an ordinary citizen. Her eyes kept drifting to the door, watching for one particular face. Just as the meeting was about to begin, Patricia Wilson slipped in, looking like she might bolt at any moment. She had dressed carefully in a modest blue sweater and dark slacks, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Diana made her way over immediately. "Ms. Wilson, I'm glad you came." Patricia gave a tight nod, her gaze fixed firmly on the floor. "I said I would." "I know it took courage," Diana said quietly. "Please take a seat. We're about to begin." As Patricia found an empty chair, Diana moved to the center of the circle. The room quieted immediately, all eyes turning to the mayor. "Good evening, everyone," Diana began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the room without seeming loud. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I see faces from all corners of our community: law enforcement, educators, business owners, parents, students, and that diversity of perspective is exactly what we need for these conversations to be meaningful." She paused, making eye contact with several people around the circle, including Patricia, who quickly looked away. "I want to be clear about why we're here," Diana continued. "This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about understanding. It's about learning to see through eyes that have had different experiences than our own. And most importantly, it's about finding a path forward together." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. "Before we begin, I'd like to introduce someone." Diana gestured toward the back of the room where Andre had been standing quietly. "Many of you already know my son, Andre. Last week he experienced something that unfortunately many young black men in our country face. Having the police called on him for simply existing in a space where someone thought he didn't belong." Andre stepped forward, nodding politely to the group. He wore his school blazer and a serious expression. "I've asked Andre to share his experience with you tonight, not to shame anyone involved, but to help us all understand the impact of these incidents on real people." "Andre?" Andre moved to the center of the circle as his mother took a seat. He looked around at the faces watching him, some curious, some uncomfortable, some openly sympathetic. "Thank you for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "A lot of people have asked me how I felt last week when Ms. Wilson called the police on me. The truth is, I felt many things. I felt surprised because I was just doing what my school had asked me to do. I felt embarrassed because suddenly I was the center of attention for all the wrong reasons." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But mostly I felt afraid. Not because the officers who responded were aggressive, they weren't. They were professional and respectful. I was afraid because I know that not every interaction between police and young black men ends that way. I was afraid because I've seen the news stories, heard the statistics, watched the videos. I was afraid because my parents have had to teach me how to navigate these situations since I was 12 years old." The room was completely silent now, every person hanging on Andre's words. "My dad taught me to keep my hands visible at all times if I'm ever stopped by police. To speak clearly and respectfully, no matter how scared or angry I might feel. To move slowly and announce my actions before I make them. I'm going to reach for my wallet now, officer. These aren't just helpful tips, they're survival skills." Several police officers in the room nodded grimly, acknowledging the reality of what Andre was describing. "I don't think Ms. Wilson wanted to put me in danger," Andre continued, glancing briefly at Patricia, who was staring at her hands in her lap. "I think she was afraid too. Afraid of what she didn't understand, of what felt unfamiliar to her. And that's why I agreed to speak tonight. Because fear on both sides is what keeps us from moving forward." Diana watched her son with undisguised pride. At 16, he showed a wisdom and compassion that many adults never achieved. She caught Captain Thomas's eye across the circle, and he gave her a small nod of respect. After Andre finished speaking and returned to his seat, a facilitator from the city's community relations department took over, guiding the group through structured exercises designed to encourage honest conversation. People shared their experiences. Black residents talked about being followed in stores, being pulled over for dubious reasons, having neighbors question their presence in their own neighborhoods. Police officers spoke about the challenges of their jobs, the split-second decisions they sometimes had to make, and their genuine desire to protect all citizens equally. Throughout the evening, Patricia remained silent, listening intently but offering nothing herself. As the 2-hour session drew to a close, the facilitator asked if anyone who hadn't spoken yet would like to share their thoughts. The room fell quiet. All eyes seemed to drift toward Patricia. After a long moment, she cleared her throat and raised her hand slightly. I'd like to say something, if that's okay." The facilitator nodded encouragingly. "Please do." Patricia stood, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm the woman who called the police on Andre last week." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the room, everyone heard her clearly. "I've spent the last week thinking about why I did that. At first, I told myself it was just about safety, about protecting my neighborhood. But after listening tonight, I can't hide from the truth anymore. I saw a young black man in a neighborhood where most residents are white, and I automatically assumed he didn't belong there. I didn't even give him a chance to explain himself before I decided he was a threat. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I've never thought of myself as racist. I have black colleagues at work. I voted for Mayor Johnson, but what I did, there's no other explanation for it, and I'm deeply ashamed. Diana watched Patricia carefully, recognizing the genuine struggle playing out on the woman's face. This wasn't a performance for the room's benefit. This was a person confronting an uncomfortable truth about herself. I don't know if Andre can ever forgive me, Patricia continued, not looking in his direction. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want to do better. I need to do better. That's why I'm here tonight and why I'll be at every session of this series, because I never want to be the reason someone feels afraid in their own community again. She sat down quickly, wiping at her eyes. The room remained silent for a moment, respecting the vulnerability of her confession. Finally, Andre stood up and walked across the circle. He stopped in front of Patricia and extended his hand. Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Wilson. It takes courage to look at yourself that way. Patricia looked up, surprise evident on her tear-stained face. After a moment's hesitation, she took his hand, nodding gratefully. The facilitator waited for Andre to return to his seat before addressing the group again. This is exactly the kind of honest conversation we need to have if we're going to move forward as a community. Thank you all for your participation tonight. We'll continue next week, same time, same place. As people began to gather their things and file out, Diana approached Patricia, who was still sitting in her chair, looking emotionally drained. That couldn't have been easy, Diana said, taking the seat next to her. Patricia shook her head. It wasn't, but it was necessary. She looked up at the mayor. I've been thinking a lot about what you said last week, about intentions versus impact. I never intended to put your son in danger, but that doesn't change the fact that I did. Diana nodded. Recognition is the first step. What matters now is what you do with that awareness moving forward. I want to help, Patricia said suddenly. With the charity drive, I mean. I know it's probably over by now, but maybe next year? I could volunteer, help organize. I work in event planning, so I have experience with fundraisers. Diana raised an eyebrow, surprised but pleased by the offer. I think that could be arranged. Andre's school is always looking for parent volunteers, even from outside the school community. Patricia nodded eagerly. I'd like that. It would be a start, at least. As they stood to leave, Captain Thomas approached them. Mayor Johnson, Ms. Wilson. Good session tonight. Diana smiled. Thank you for coming, Captain, and for encouraging your officers to attend as well. It's important work, he replied simply. Then, turning to Patricia, he added, What you did tonight took guts, ma'am. Not everyone can admit when they've made a mistake, especially in front of their whole community. Patricia gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Well, it was a pretty public mistake to begin with. Seems fitting that the apology should be public, too. As they walked toward the exit together, Andre fell into step beside them, chatting with a young officer who had been particularly engaged during the discussion. Diana watched them from the corner of her eye, grateful for this small sign of progress, her son and a police officer talking easily as equals. Outside in the parking lot, Patricia stopped by her car. Mayor Johnson, before you go, there's something I've been wanting to ask. Yes? How did you stay so composed that day? If it had been my child, I don't think I could have remained as professional as you did. Diana was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Years of practice, Ms. Wilson. Black parents learn early that losing control, even when justified, can make situations worse for our children. We learn to channel our anger into action instead. She glanced over at Andre, who was still deep in conversation with the young officer. Besides, I could see that Andre was handling himself with dignity. The best thing I could do was model the same behavior, even though inside I was furious. Patricia nodded slowly. I'm starting to understand how exhausting that must be. Having to be so careful all the time. It is, Diana agreed. Which is why conversations like the one we had tonight are so important. Because maybe someday, we won't have to be. As they said their goodbyes and headed to their respective cars, Diana felt a cautious optimism. One conversation wouldn't solve centuries of racial tension. One woman's awakening wouldn't change systemic problems overnight. But it was a start. And sometimes that was enough to build on. 6 months had passed since that fateful autumn day when Patricia Wilson called the police on Andre Johnson. Spring had arrived in the city, bringing with it not just blooming flowers and warmer temperatures, but visible signs of change in the community as well. The final session of the dialogue series had concluded weeks ago, but its impact continued to ripple outward. What had begun as a response to a single incident had evolved into a sustained community effort. The police department had implemented new training protocols. Neighborhood associations across the city had established welcome committees for new residents. Local schools had incorporated discussions about bias into their curriculums. On this particular Saturday morning, Maple Avenue was transformed. Colorful tents lined the street. Volunteers in bright t-shirts directed traffic, and a banner stretched across the entrance to the neighborhood. First Annual Veterans Support Fair. All are welcome. In the center of it all stood Patricia Wilson and Andre Johnson, checking items off a clipboard and directing volunteers to their stations. The food trucks should be arriving in about 30 minutes, Patricia said, consulting her watch. The music is all set up and the veterans' resource tables are good to go. Andre nodded, making a note. Perfect. Mom just texted that she's on her way with the ceremonial scissors for the ribbon cutting. What had started as Patricia's offer to help with Andre's school charity drive had blossomed into something much bigger. When Andre mentioned that the veterans' shelter needed more than just money, they needed community awareness and support, Patricia had suggested leveraging her event planning experience to create something more substantial than a door-to-door fundraiser. Working together over the past few months, they had transformed an idea into reality, securing permits, recruiting sponsors, and mobilizing the entire neighborhood to support the cause. Andre! A voice called out. Andre turned to see Mr. Lewis, the elderly man who had defended him during the police incident, making his way toward them with the help of his cane. Looking good, son. You two have done a remarkable job. Andre smiled, taking the old man's free hand in both of his. We couldn't have done it without community support, Mr. Lewis. Thank you for letting us use your front yard for the children's activities. Mr. Lewis waved away the thanks. Happy to do it. My Irene would have loved seeing all these children playing here. He turned to Patricia. And you, young lady. I've been meaning to tell you how impressed I am with what you've done these past months. Patricia blushed slightly, still not entirely comfortable with praise related to her personal growth. Just trying to be a better neighbor, Mr. Lewis. Well, you're succeeding, he replied simply, before moving on to explore the fair. Andre and Patricia exchanged a small smile. Their relationship had evolved from that terrible first encounter into something neither of them could have predicted. Not quite friendship, but a partnership based on mutual respect and a shared commitment to healing their community. Officer Chen appeared through the crowd, now in casual clothes rather than her uniform. Everything on track? She asked, approaching their check-in table. Right on schedule, Andre confirmed. Thanks again for coordinating the police department's involvement. After the incident, Officer Chen had become an unexpected ally, volunteering to serve as liaison between the community and the police force. Today, several officers were staffing a booth designed to help veterans learn about careers in law enforcement. Captain Thomas sends his regrets, Officer Chen told them. He was called away on a family emergency, but he wanted me to tell you how proud he is of what you've accomplished here. Patricia nodded. Please tell him we appreciate all his support. We couldn't have secured the street permits without his help. As Officer Chen moved on, a sleek black SUV pulled up at the designated VIP parking area. Mayor Diana Johnson emerged, looking relaxed in a casual pantsuit rather than her usual formal attire. Several city council members followed, along with representatives from local veterans organizations. Andre waved to his mother, who gave him a thumbs up before being whisked away by the event coordinator for the official opening ceremony. I still can't believe how many people showed up, Patricia murmured, looking around at the growing crowd. Families with children, elderly veterans in military caps, young couples, people of all races and backgrounds. The diversity was exactly what they had hoped for. People want to be part of something positive, Andre replied, especially after everything that happened. The everything didn't need elaboration. The incident between them had made local news, especially after people learned that the black teenager who'd had the police called on him was the mayor's son. For a few weeks, their neighborhood had been under an uncomfortable spotlight. But rather than let the story be one of division and racial tension, Mayor Johnson had skillfully redirected the narrative toward healing and community building. The latter dialogue series had been covered extensively by local media, and now this Veterans Fair represented the tangible outcome of those difficult but necessary conversations. We should head to the main stage, Patricia said, checking her watch again. The opening ceremony starts in 10 minutes. As they made their way through the crowd, several people stopped them to offer congratulations or ask questions about the day's schedule. Andre handled each interaction with the same warm politeness he'd shown that day on his fundraising rounds, while Patricia managed the logistics with professional efficiency. At the main stage, Mayor Johnson was speaking quietly, with a group of veterans when she spotted Andre and Patricia approaching. She excused herself and met them halfway. "You two have done an incredible job," she said, genuine pride in her voice. "This is so much bigger than I expected." Andre grinned. "Patricia's the one who managed to get 3 local businesses to match donations. We've already raised more than double what the school drive brought in last year." Patricia shook her head modestly. "Andre's the one who got half the high school to volunteer. I just made some phone calls." Diana looked between them, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, 6 months ago I wouldn't have believed this was possible. Sometimes the worst moments can lead to the most unexpected growth." The stage manager signaled that it was time to begin. Diana squeezed her son's shoulder and nodded respectfully to Patricia before taking her place at the podium. As the crowd gathered around the stage, Andre and Patricia found themselves standing side by side in the front row. "Nervous?" Andre asked, noticing Patricia fiddling with the hem of her shirt. "A little," she admitted. "I'm not used to being in the spotlight." "You'll be great," he assured her. "Just speak from the heart, like you did at the dialogue sessions." Patricia had surprised everyone, including herself, by becoming one of the most active participants in the community dialogue series. After her initial confession that first night, she had returned each week, gradually opening up about her own biases and listening intently to others' experiences. By the final session, she had emerged as an unexpected advocate for community policing reforms and neighborhood integration efforts. Mayor Johnson welcomed everyone to the event, speaking eloquently about the importance of supporting veterans and building stronger community bonds. Then she introduced Andre and Patricia as the co-organizers, inviting them to the stage. As they climbed the steps, Patricia whispered, "Your mom didn't have to give us credit. This was her initiative, really." Andre shook his head. "That's not how she works. Mom believes in giving credit where it's due." Standing at the podium together, they faced the crowd. Neighbors, police officers, veterans, city officials, and strangers who had come from across the city after hearing about the event. Andre spoke first, thanking everyone for coming and explaining how the fair had grown out of his school's charity drive. Then he turned to Patricia, giving her the space to tell her part of the story. Patricia took a deep breath, her hands steady on the podium. "6 months ago, I made a terrible mistake," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I let fear and bias cloud my judgment, and I put this young man at risk by calling the police simply because I didn't think he belonged in my neighborhood." A hush fell over the crowd. Most of the local residents knew the story, but many visitors were hearing it for the first time. "I could have chosen to hide from what that mistake revealed about me," Patricia continued. "Instead, with the generous guidance of Mayor Johnson and the patience of her son Andre, I chose to face it. And what I discovered was that growth is possible at any age, that communities can heal, and that sometimes the people we're quickest to judge become our most important teachers." She turned to Andre, genuine affection in her expression. Working with Andre these past months has taught me more than any book or training session ever could. He's shown me what real character looks like, what forgiveness feels like, and how to channel regret into positive action. Andre smiled, slightly embarrassed by the praise, but appreciating the sincerity behind it. Today isn't about me or my journey, Patricia concluded, turning back to the crowd. It's about supporting our veterans, yes, but it's also about showing what a community can accomplish when we move beyond our assumptions and fears to see each other as full human beings worthy of respect and dignity. Thank you all for being part of that journey. The applause was immediate and heartfelt. Diana Johnson joined them on stage for the ceremonial ribbon cutting, and as the oversized scissors sliced through the red ribbon, cheers erupted throughout the crowd. As the official ceremony concluded and people dispersed to enjoy the fair, a reporter from the local newspaper approached. Ms. Wilson, Andre, would you mind answering a few questions about how this event came together? It's such an inspiring story of community healing. Patricia looked at Andre, silently deferring to him. After all, he had been the one wronged by her actions. If anyone had the right to determine how their story was told, it was him. Andre considered, for a moment, then nodded. We'd be happy to talk with you, but with one condition. This story isn't just about the two of us. It's about an entire community that was willing to have difficult conversations and do the hard work of change. The reporter nodded, jotting down his words. That's exactly the angle I want to explore. So many communities face similar tensions, but few find constructive ways to address them. What you've accomplished here could serve as a model for others. As they walked with the reporter toward a quieter area to continue the conversation, Patricia spotted a familiar face in the crowd, the young couple with the baby who had defended Andre that day. The baby, now a toddler, was proudly wearing a tiny t-shirt with the fair's logo. 1 second, Patricia said, excusing herself briefly to approach them. I just wanted to thank you for coming today, and for speaking up that day when it mattered. The woman smiled, bouncing her child on her hip. We wouldn't have missed this. What you and Andre have built here is exactly what this neighborhood needed. Rejoining Andre and the reporter, Patricia felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The guilt and shame that had driven her initial efforts had gradually transformed into something more sustainable, a genuine commitment to being part of the solution rather than the problem. As they answered the reporter's questions, sharing both the challenges and triumphs of the past 6 months, Patricia caught sight of Mayor Johnson watching them from across the fairground, a proud smile on her face. Whatever came next, for the neighborhood, for the dialogue series that would continue, for the annual Veterans Fair that would surely grow each year, Patricia knew that something fundamental had shifted, not just in her, but in the community as a whole. What had begun with a phone call born of fear and bias had somehow, against all odds, become a catalyst for connection and change. Not an ending, but a beginning. Messy, imperfect, and infinitely hopeful.